Welcome to week 4. And before we move on to our new week and really spending our time getting ready for our chapter presentations, I just want to go over the 5 basic orientations so that we think about them as we think about creating activities for our chapter synthesis presentation and creating those materials. So let's take one more look at the 5 basic orientations. And those are behaviorist, humanist, cognitive and social cognitive, and constructivist. Okay, let's look at behaviorist first. In a behaviorist viewpoint, a behaviorist orientation toward learners, instructors arrange their environment to elicit a desired response. This is a stimulus response sort of theory. And the instructor, it's instructor-centered rather than learner-centered. It's about the instructor designing the goals and designing how specifically the learner will achieve those goals. So first, behavior is the focus. Rather than internal thought process, it's learning to change behavior due to a stimulus. So you elicit a specific response and you reward the good behavior of that response. You also ignore any response that doesn't achieve that goal. You ignore it rather than punish it. You ignore it if you're going to use the opposite behavior way. Okay, second, the environment shapes the behavior. And third, principles of contiguity and reinforcement explain the learning process. Okay, let's then take a look at how that works. Thorndike was considered the greatest learning theorist, especially when we're talking about behaviorism. He used animals in controlled experiments and formulated what are considered the 3 laws of learning to explain his findings. The law of effect, that learners acquire and remember responses that satisfy. Again, if there is some kind of reward, then the learner remembers it. The law of exercise, that repetition, so drill in order to learn something. And that drilling allows the learner to make the connection that A gets B. A gets B. And you, over and over again, are drilling that in so that it's somewhat muscle memory and it's not cognitive. And then the law of readiness, the subject is ready to learn. If the subject is ready to learn, then the learning occurs. Now, one of the ways in behaviorism that that's achieved is if you make the cat hungry, it's ready, and you have as the reward cat food, then the cat is ready to learn it and will pull the string down in order to open the box in order to come out and be able to eat the food. And that is a very typical kind of experiment that elicited the stimulus response behavior. Skinner, B.F. Skinner, is often thought of as the behaviorist guru or primary researcher, original researcher, but he really built on Thorndike and its operant conditioning that reinforced desirable response and ignores the undesirable response. We tend to want to punish, have something that will punish. What we end up doing if we have the punishment there is that we make it intermittent. Sometimes we reinforce, sometimes we ignore, sometimes we punish. And that allows the undesirable behavior to go along longer than if we ignored it and only reinforced what we desire as the outcome. So that is the operant conditioning. And that pretty much in a nutshell is behaviorism. Moving to humanism and that orientation, the instructors who relate from a humanist orientation facilitate the development of the whole person. They are looking at focusing on potential for growth. And primarily, they're on the side rather than in front, and they want to create some kind of a situation in which the learners are going to, on their own, be achieving growth. And so the role of the facilitator is to provide the resources to make that happen, or to create the landscape, the ecology for that to happen. And humanism emphasizes perceptions that are rooted in experience. People grow with the agency, the freedom, the responsibility to, on their own, realize their potential. So, creating that environment and all of the resources and the encouragement that they can do this, that the learners can achieve. And that is the heart and soul of a humanist orientation. Are you a humanist? Then a humanist orientation, again, people control their own destiny. And people are inherently good and will strive for a better world. People are free to act. They have agency. And whatever behavior, whatever the consequence of the choice is what happens. People possess unlimited potential. And for the instructor, for the person who is springing from an orientation viewpoint, they hold that view of all of their learners, that they have unlimited potential, and they share that view of their learners with their learners. So their learners believe that their instructors believe in them. The humanist orientation, Maslow, of course, was a humanist, and we're looking here at going beyond self-actualization. So we're going to transcendence. So this is a 7-step process that doesn't begin with safety. It begins with biological and physical needs. People need air, food, warmth. They have safety needs, protection, security, order, stability. They have a belongingness need and an esteem need of achievement and responsibility. They have cognitive needs of knowledge, meaning, awareness, aesthetic needs of beauty and balance, and self-actualization needs of achieving self-fulfillment and growth, and then a transcendence need to help others, to reach back to help them self-actualize. And this is Maslow's belief system that he put into a humanist orientation. Are you a humanist? A cognitive orientation steps back into behaviorism, but says, no, there's more to it than that. It's not just stimulus response. There's a cognitive piece in here. And so it looks more at the process as if you're a computer, and that your mind is processing whatever the stimulus is in order for you to thoughtfully elicit a response. And that takes cognitive orientation theory to an indifferent level than perhaps Skinner and Thorndike were talking about. So the brain and how it works is the center of learning from a cognitive learning perspective. Then going to a social cognitive orientation, it looks at that learning and the stimulus response as more in a social setting. So social learning, social cognitive learning, and Bandura is a social cognitive theorist, suggests that learning occurs through observing people in one's own immediate environment, and then taking that knowledge and constructing that into what you have available to you, what your personal factors are and what your environmental factors are, and building on that. Looking at this dancing, for example, saying, I want to dance, I'm going to do what they're doing. Do I have the things that they have or at my disposal in my environment? If so, I'm going to learn to dance. Do I have the self-efficacy in my own self to do what they're doing? Do I have the belief in my capability to do what they're doing? And the physiological factors that allow me to do that? If so, I'm going to be a dancing person. The constructive orientation looks at the instructor's ability to facilitate from an entirely different view, and it's looking at the role of the instructor to negotiate meaning making. In this light, the instructor is also providing resources, but providing resources for self-directed learning, transformational learning, experiential learning, situated cognition, and reflective practice, but stepping definitely to the side to encourage the learner and allow the learner to, with the abilities of that individual and the resources the instructor provides, to, on the individual's own, take those steps forward and learn. So constructivism asks us to look at teaching and learning from a very different perspective, definitely as the instructor is on the side and the learner is in front, taking the lead in the learning situation. So are you a constructivist? Are you a social learning instructor? Are you a humanist? Are you a behaviorist? What do you spring from in your orientation? Okay, that leads us to week 4. And here we are working on our chapter presentations. And primary, you can notice that you have, each of you, a forum that you can go into for your chapter with your group, and your group has already been identified. You have selected your chapters, and so we have groups already identified. So this week we will have no other activity than for us to get into our groups and talk about what we're going to do. That does not make this a free week. That makes this a week that I've given you in order for you to work on your chapter synthesis presentation. I know that the Chapter 4 group is already doing that and have reached out to me, and we're already getting that done. But I do want every one of you to take this as a week set aside for you to get started on that, to reach out to your group and to begin looking at those teaching orientations that we talked about last week and deciding what activities would be appropriate for your learners from those various perspectives. What do you think would be appropriate? And maybe the content helps determine what you think would be an appropriate teaching learning orientation. Maybe experiential learning relates to the constructivist, but you decide what you would want to utilize for teaching and learning. So that's where we are, and let's get started on week 4.